Okay, another step you don't really want to skip until you're well practiced, until you've done at least 50 multiplications of this type. If you have the square root of -25 multiplied by the square root of -81, well, this gives you 25 times the square root. Well, I'm going to write this out in detail, in a little more detail than I started. Okay, so I'm going to write this out as first I'm going to write -25 as 25 times -1. Because we did this with lots of exponents inside of radicals and stuff, so you're used to those rules. And if you're not totally used to them, it's a good idea to review them. Okay? And then we have the square root of 81 times -1. So this should kind of feel like what we've done before, except we're doing it in a different context, which always seems like you're doing something completely different. Okay? So this is what? This is 5 times the square root of -1. Well, now I'm going to do, since I'm doing all the steps, square root of 25 times the square root of -1 multiplied by the square root of 81 times the square root of -1. And that equals 5 times the square root of -1 multiplied by 9 times the square root of -1. And that's then 5i times 9i and I'm kind of skipping something here, but I'll write that as 45i squared. Now you really want to write the power of I, because sometimes you'll end up with an I cubed or an I to the 5th or something. Okay? And it's easy to lose track of what that means. Okay? So this is why you get -45. Now you correctly skip the step. You know, you got 5i times 9i, and then you just wrote -45, right? At this point, I think it's best to write it out in all the detail you can, so you're sure you understand the rules. Now, if you want to write it out, and if you want to skip steps, just write it down and see how it works out, and then write it off to the side where you don't skip steps to verify.
All right.
Does that make sense? Just advice, but I think you'll do better if you are very explicit about the rules you're using, because then you're on a much firmer foundation when you have to do it for real,
Okay.
like when you're taking a test.
Yeah.